Do you take this man for your lawful husband? Yes, I do. And do you take this lady for your lawful wife? Yes, I do. I'm getting married in the morning. Ding dong, you hear the church bell.
Hello. Don't get me wrong, I've never seen this table coming down. Everyone's got different situations with their parents.
I definitely still believe in marriage. I'd love to get married. I think fun to celebrate being with someone.
Not everyone finds someone that they fall in love with.
Well, for me it's quite funny because obviously I have a boyfriend and stuff, and when I'm with him I think I could marry this boy, I could have kids with him. But at the same time I wouldn't want to do that until I was like late 20s, early 30s. So it's like...
Girls are a bit more like,
They develop
this could happen,
slower.
maybe we're not going to get married, we'll live together. Boys have a more of a standard, settled, I'm going to get married by the time I'm 40. I think they're on some sort of...
Guys now are like, oh, I could get married at 40.
We all want to like wear an amazing dress and
Have
have an amazing party.
At core, we all want reliable love in our relationships, and I think we've forgotten that there are two sides of commitment. There's the bit about commitment where we say we want to spend the rest of our lives with one another, and you can do that perfectly well privately. I love you and I want to spend the rest of my life with you, and I can do that behind closed doors, and as an unmarried couple, there's no need for marriage in that. The flip side of it is the saying no to other choices. It's closing the door on other options and saying, do you know what, I choose you, but I'm also I'm getting rid of all the other options.
We will see threads by people saying, oh, I always thought we were going to get married and now we've had 2 kids and we're still not married, and why hasn't he asked me? To which they would usually get the reply, why are you waiting for him to ask you? If that's what you want, you know, this isn't a romantic game. If you want the legal protections, you want the long-term stability of marriage, it's your responsibility as much as his to make that move. You shouldn't sit there and wait for somebody to ask you. So there's quite a trenchant kind of feminist response to that, really, which is take control of your life. If that's what you want, ask him. Get the ring and get down on one knee and ask him yourself.
Most of them, with very few exceptions, have been living together for some amount of time. So it's acknowledging, look, we've got this relationship, it's really important, but actually I want to put a crown on that. I want to say, this is my lifetime relationship. This is a real commitment I'm making. And so coming to church and meeting together and saying those vows is a real public acknowledgement that this isn't just something that's going to be here today and gone tomorrow. I want to come into church, I want to celebrate, and I want to share that joy with everyone else.
Do you think that people are put off now the traditional wedding just costing too much? Do you think there's something like that?
I mean, I think sadly people assume that in order to get married you've got to have a car, a massive reception, 1,000 flowers, all sorts of things, which actually you don't need. You can get married with just the two of you and your family, you know, on a Saturday afternoon or a Friday afternoon, and just enjoy it and celebrate. And you can do that in church or anywhere else.
About a month before we got married, I got cold feet.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I can remember coming up to Finchley to see him. I remember arriving at the door and floods of tears, and my mother and my sister, they were, what's the matter? What's the matter? And I said, oh, I don't know whether I can go through it. And they said, you don't have to, you can wait a year. And I went, I don't want to wait a year. So anyway, it worked out all right in the end. And it did. It happened.
Well, if you had that kind of struggle then, what kept you two going?
I suppose you just do.
Yes. I think you just get on with it, you know.
I mean, we did have times, and I can honestly say when he got so involved with his work, I can think of 2 or 3 times in our marriage when I've had to say, look, when we've lost it.
You talk to people who've been married 40, 50, 60, whatever years. They have created a unity, as a welding together of personalities, which is the deepest possible consolation as you get older. There's no other way of repeating it. There's no other way of replicating it than just actually doing it for a very long time and finding a way through the difficulties and, as I say, living this experience. And I mean, one of the hugely stupid myths that is out there at the moment is that, of course, we've got a high rate of family breakdown because we all live longer. And because we all live longer, brackets, we therefore must obviously want more of a change, you see. So this is the sort of rubbish that's surrounding this whole subject, along with 100 other myths. It is, we live longer, ergo we are going to have more breakdown because people want to change. Totally, totally false. The longer you're married, the longer you will remain married.
Marriage is the most stable of the relationships, and it remains the most stable, far more stable than cohabitation. I think myself that gay marriages and civil partnerships will in due course be the second most stable form of relationship, because I have a great deal of respect and have indeed made orders sending children to gay couples, male and female, particularly male actually, where I thought the older child, would be very well placed. So I do think, because they make commitments, the whole point about the civil partnership, the whole point about the gay marriage, the whole point about the marriage is you take a commitment. You haven't got an easy way out.
If you were to walk down a typical street in the UK and imagine that there were just 8 houses in that street and they all contained families with children, you'd find that 5 of those families would have married parents in them, 2 would have lone parents in them, and 1 would have cohabiting parents in them. So that's the sort of ratio at the moment. If you went back 30 or 40 years, you'd find that 7 out of 8 were married parents and 1 was a lone parent. So the big change in that street over the last 30 or 40 years has been the emergence of cohabitation. It didn't really exist before birth control became more widely available in the 1970s. There was no cohabitation to all intents and purposes. And that's been the big change, and it's brought with it this huge wave of family breakdown. So half of family breakdown is caused by divorce, half of it is by the collapse of unmarried couples. And that's really what makes our street today in Britain look different to what it was 40 years ago.
So you divorced?
We separated nearly 3 years ago and divorced a year ago. I think it has affected the children. I think from my point of view, I've been having a lovely time, not having the restrictions of being married. The children, they're getting the best of both worlds in some instances, because I think probably their dad's slightly overcompensated for the fact that we're not together.
If you put children through family breakdown, make no mistake about it, however brilliantly you do it, they will be affected for the rest of their life, and it never leaves them. I know solicitors who've been in this business for years who have been subjected to it, and the moment you start them off, they talk about nothing else. So do not run away with the myth that we have done it so well that our children luckily have not been affected. I'm afraid I don't buy that. I simply don't buy it after watching this for 43 years. It is not the case. Not only is it not the case, I mean, it is a terrible deception you're working on yourself. And it's made worse by some of our more recent research, which supports American research, which is that actually, if you do it in a very civilized way, far from actually protecting your children from the effects, it in many cases makes it worse, because if children are living in a household where there's a high level of conflict and the plates are flying and people are getting knocked about, when mum and dad say we can't live together, the children in their childish way think, well, we know that, we can see that, because if we carry on like this, we're all going to get caught in the crossfire. When mum and dad do it all very quietly behind closed doors, and then one day invite little Johnny and little Jill in and sit them down and say, I'm afraid mummy and daddy don't love each other anymore, and we're going to live separately and we're going to get divorced. But it's all right because we still love you, and we are going to carry on carry on seeing us both. It does their head in. Why? The little child up. Why? There's nothing wrong here. We're all perfectly happy. What is it about a adult relationship that we don't know about, which is causing this terrible impact on our lives? And children hate it. Hate it.
I think it could have been sorted in that first court case in, 2000, 2002. Could have been done so simply, so simply. I think the issue is that it's not set up to be done simply. It's not set up to be sorted quickly, because this was a simple case. My dad had never done anything wrong. He wasn't a bad dad. Like you said, he was a registered childminder. There was nothing wrong with my family. It was literally, we just needed some sort of, contact to be made, because they couldn't discuss it between themselves.
Do you think it should actually be for the courts to say 50-50, so a legal presumption of shared parenting should be enshrined in family law?
Yeah, there wouldn't be any issues then. So much comes out of there being this battle. It's set up one parent over the other.
The role of CAFCAS is to represent the voice of the child in the family courts, and children are involved in the family courts in two different sets of circumstances. In what's called technically public law, when a local authority has made an application for a child to be taken into care, is one circumstance, and in private law is when parents who are separating can't agree the arrangements for their child, and are applying to the courts to help determine those arrangements.
Yeah, as I understand CAFCAS, they're there for the welfare of the child. So when mum and dad split up, they get involved with both parents and any children to see what the fundamental reasons were for splitting up, making sure those kiddies are safe. My observation and my biggest problem with CAFCAS is they're involved in the bulk of all cases. So in my personal story, there were no welfare issues about my son. Both the mother and I agreed with that. Yet we went through a lengthy process on 3 occasions over 12 years for interviews to take place, for reports to be written, for suggestions of contact at the request of the non-resident parent to be discussed.
So you were the non-resident parent. So your son, when you split up, your son stayed with your ex-wife, and then you had contact.
But, well, I didn't have automatic contact. I was denied contact.
Why is that?
To this day, I still don't know.
Where domestic violence and abuse isn't an issue, our basic view is that the court generally isn't the right place for parents to be resolving their differences and deciding on arrangements for their children after separation. And therefore, an increasing amount of our work these days is diverted to trying to work with parents to help them make their own arrangements without having to go to the court. But most of all, and above all, it's about how best to represent the wishes and feelings of children, because I said our basic role is to ensure that the voice of the child is heard in court cases.
Do you feel that your voice was ever listened to? No. Do you feel that you were ever heard?
Not at all. I mean, I was always told that I was important, and I was always told, it's all in my best interests, and that your parents both love you very much, and that, this is for you. But yeah, this went on for 10 years of complete heartbreak. And to be honest with you, people saying this is for you, your parents love you, puts a lot on me. I mean, I think I take quite a lot of kind of blame for it, that both my parents love me so much, and I was in the middle of this massive, like, horrible time, and it was because of me, because people couldn't sort out that I just wanted to be 50% with my mum and 50% with my dad. How can it be that confusing? How can all of this happen just because that's the setup?
90% of cases where parents are divorcing or separating never come anywhere near us. It's only the 10%. So they're going to be quite entrenched when they get to us. We still feel that a number of the cases which come to us and which currently go to the courts really don't need to, if only we could encourage the parents to sort of think about trying to make arrangements themselves with some help from a third party. It might be from ourselves, from the family court advisor, it might be from a mediator. There's a range of different people.
Because I was thrown out of the family home, I was living in a bedsit. Kafkas would not let me take my child back there, so I was forced to meet my child in a contact centre. Contact centres historically were for non-resident dads who were potentially a violent threat to either the mother or to the children. It was supervised contact. And the rules there, I wasn't even allowed to take a photograph of my son. The saddest day of my life was sharing Christmas in the middle of December with not just my son, but with a host of all dads with their children, opening presents in the middle of December.
Kafkas came to interview me, and I had an interview at school. And by this point, I'd felt like, I was going to stamp my feet. I was so furious about what had happened. And we went into our library, and the Kafkas officer started, asking me questions. We had a really long interview. He was trying to explain the court process to me, so I had a better understanding of it. And I just told him exactly how I felt. I'd done it before in interviews. I'd gone in so determined that I was just going to, not let anyone blur what I was saying. I was just going to say it straight. And so many times I'd come out of these interviews just feeling so small and just like, what I felt didn't matter at all. And yeah, I went into this interview and I didn't let him talk. I told him exactly what was going on. I told him how I'd felt and how I'd been treated, and that this was wrong, and that I wasn't going to let it happen anymore. And I told him that if I didn't see my dad more, I was going to run away.
Certainly, Kafkas had its fair share of difficulties in early years. And it was very clear that the organisation needed to improve, and we've been on a very conscious improvement journey since, certainly since 2012, although I think it really started more like 2010. And we have worked very hard to provide a better service to the children that we're serving, for families, and for the service that we provide to the court. And hopefully both parents will continue to have a long-term relationship with the child, and the court is not a third parent. I think sometimes when there's high levels of sort of conflict and real entrenched difficulties, high anger and hurt and sense of betrayal, all those sorts of things tend to look to the court as the third parent, or even want to have their day in court. That is rarely in the child's best interest.
The Family Justice Young People's Board is around 50 children aged 8 to 24, and it's a variety of ages, so that you've got different viewpoints as well, because a 17-year-old's view is different to an 8-year-old's, and the way they want to be treated is different, and their experiences are different. And within that, we all do different things. Like older kids might want to go and do inspections and workshops, while younger ones will want to do view places and see, okay, this is what's happening here. So there's activities for everyone to do. So you feedback and you say how it is. And with courts as well, I've made sure that they're becoming more child friendly, like they're not so confusing. So if you're going to court for something, you know why you're going, and there's boards there so you let children know.
I have definitely been let down by our system, as I know a lot of children have, and I think they're corrupt. Everything I've experienced with them is corrupt, and even now, I'm 17 now, and I still struggle to deal with all that's happened. So many things. Normal people, but at my school, people can get on with things, and yet I'm there still struggling to trust people and to let people in and to sleep and to understand my own feelings, because I grew up in a time where I had to grow up really quickly and try and understand things that didn't make sense and that didn't have answers and that were not fair. My dad was treated like a criminal and put down, and he couldn't do anything right, and anything he did wrong or they pushed him to do was used against him. And yet my mother, she was always she's crying, sympathise, she needs support, and I think the system is set up like that, where the mother is needing help and support, and all positive points are taken from her, and the dad is some aggressive man that needs controlling and is threatening to a family.
Some dads actually went to the extremes and actually just dissolved their companies or had themselves made redundant so that they could then claim legal aid. Well, of course, now that's been suspended. So what's happening to all these dads?
Well, legal aid has now been and gone. Dads are suffering. Sadly, in the UK, there are so many broken homes, single parenting households, it's becoming the norm. Nobody in family law, nobody in government has actually gone to the root cause of all this. The root cause is that the UK has a failing court system.
Personally, I felt like the family courts were wonderful because, like I said, I was a really rare case because I was one of the oldest children, but they showed me the courtrooms. They offered me to see a judge if I ever wanted to meet with a judge. But more than that, they treated me as a person and they wanted to hear how I felt. And the rooms were child-friendly as well. And I felt like they did everything right. But apart from that, I feel like before it even begun, more background, more research should have been gone into the case because, like I said, I'm a person and I'm not just another number and not just another case. Because if that did go into that, I wouldn't have had to come at all.
Because you were still only 15.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that other 15-year-olds would have been able to cope?
For me, it was the fact that I had to be strong for my mum and my little sister that made me go through it.
But a lot of children just wouldn't have that maturity, would they?
No, and that's why with kids, we're really delicate. We're like glass, and if you break us, you can't just put us back together. And that's why it's like when your parents fight or they go to court, it's like a little crack each time, and one day they will explode.
And being in the middle, all the time, being in the middle, every decision that's made, every choice gets put on me. I took the weight of that on, and it affects me even now. I mean, at school, primary school, towards the end of primary school, my parents, they'd always both come to, parents' evening and things like this. And it's difficult because, people have asked me, obviously that's good that both your parents come and they, they're civil for you, they get on for you. And I'm like, yeah, I can see that's good and it's better than them really arguing and all this. But actually, it's so stressful for me. I find it really difficult. I'd have to, it sounds ridiculous, I'd count how many times I looked at my mum and at my dad at these events to make sure that I knew, that people knew, I loved them equally. I didn't love one parent more than the other. They weren't going to use me. I was always used. It was on me. I was the one that was hurting my parents. They both loved me. They were fighting for me. And it was me. It was me that was hurting them. And
so you actually felt that you were to blame for it all?
For a really long time I felt that. And then growing up with the whole campaigning thing and understanding the family courts a lot more, I could see that, this isn't my fault. This isn't my fault. This is what they're doing to me. But still, it's there. You have that responsibility. I feel so responsible for both of my parents. And I get so worried that, it's ridiculous that, that I'm going to say something, that I did with the other one, and that could be used to, put one down, put the other one in, a position in court, just anything, absolutely anything. And it's difficult. It's really hard.
We commissioned the Norgrove Independent Family Law Report to advise on various aspects. One, as you've said, about how we can better deal with children in care and speed up the adoption system. And then there was also the whole issue about shared parenting and what happens to those kids caught in the middle of often acrimonious divorce cases between husband and wife. And for many years, shared parenting has been a moot issue. It's been called equal parenting and it's taken various different forms. So we asked Norgrove to have a look at it. He came back recommending that there shouldn't be a presumption of shared parenting in law. Now, I was minister at the time, and the government responded to the review at the beginning of 2012. I took a different view in that I thought that the only way really to impress upon parents that the children should be absolutely paramount when they happened to want to end their relationship, you don't divorce your children. And the best way of doing that was making it quite clear that, frankly, they should be able to come to suitable arrangements for the children by acting as adults without having to go through the legal system, and often using the courtroom in order to play out the differences between couples that they'd had in the domestic home, and using the children too often as pawns. And so by enshrining in law a principle of shared parenting that would treat each parent as having an absolutely full responsibility to play as full a part in the upbringing of their children as possible, and hopefully that would instill some sense of responsibility and some common sense in warring parents. So we did not adopt the Norgrove proposals in full, and my recommendation was to go with the presumption of shared parenting. I then ceased to be the minister, and the subsequent minister watered down effectively those proposals when it became law. So it was a rather diluted form of shared parenting which eventually made it onto the statute book.
We've had a series of children adoption legislation, and I did manage to persuade the government that their idea of shared parenthood was not a good idea. And they managed to take the phrase out, and I managed to get the agreement of families need fathers, that you shouldn't have equal time of both parents, because the time that the child spends with each parent should be dictated by what is best for the child in that particular family. And there are courts in the United States where the children spend 6 months with one family and 6 months with another. I mean, that's appalling.
It was quite a controversial subject, and has been one that needed resolving and had needed resolving for some years. So I would hope that if I'd been there to see it through, we might have had rather more clearly defined legislation which absolutely upheld the integrity of the whole principle of shared parenting. Many judges were not happy with it, as they aren't with many changes affecting the legal system, because they think it's encroaching on their independence within the courtroom. But the whole purpose of this was to keep families out of the courtrooms, because if it's absolutely clear that unless there's a very good reason why one of those parents should not have full access to those children, play a full part in that child's upbringing, then the assumption would be that both parents should be a part of that. And if a parent wanted to use the legal system to launch vexatious complaints, to frustrate the system, to delay a settlement, and for all that time to freeze out the non-resident parent from their child's life, as so often happens, particularly to fathers, then they should have a second thought, because we needed to change the law that meant that both of them were going to have a look in, unless there was a good cause otherwise.
Can you tell me at what point couples come to you to actually come to solicitors? And if they come to you, is it mum that comes? Is it dad? You know, on your experience, who's basically...
both come. So you get mixed. I think because of where we're based, we probably get more men than women because we're based in the city. But actually, you get more or less equal numbers, I think, of people coming to you for advice. When did they come? Some come a long time before they do anything, years beforehand, and they almost come back for a regular sort of annual checkup of, I'm really not sure what to do. I've still not made my mind up. What's the situation? What's the law like? But generally, or people come just as they're about to separate, just before, to get a bit of advice before they pull the plug, so they know where they stand.
I started Father's Justice in 2001. It's when the germ, the idea was initially seeded. I went through what started off as a really amicable divorce. It was okay. And then the solicitors got involved, and it got messy, and it became about conflict and confrontation, and very quickly I was sucked into what I call the devil's labyrinth of the family justice system, which once you're in, you can't escape.
So, without further ado, he is stiff competition for the rest. Give it up for Mr. George Galloway. Politicians run away from this issue. That's true. So many MPs said to me, we don't want to get involved in that. The women's movement, the women's lobby will be down on you like a ton of bricks. You get involved with them, they're all misogynists, and so on. But I already knew by then that you didn't have to be a misogynist or a wife-beater or a feckless father to be affected by this issue of having your children taken away from you because your relationship with their mother had fallen on difficult times.
There's been a lot of criticism about the privacy and the secrecy that is actually around the family courts. Now that you're out of it, what's your feelings now as somebody?
Well, I don't think my feelings now have changed. I subscribe to the view, very much held by the present president of the Family Division, Sir James Mumby, that where possible, everything we do in the Family Division should be open to the public. But we have to bear in mind the children. And by and large, children who've been asked about it say they don't want it to be made public. So we have, on the one hand, the public needing to know that secrecy doesn't mean something going wrong, that judges always find for mothers, which they don't, or that judges are always unfair, which they're not, I have to say. But on the other hand, you have particularly the children who are extremely concerned that their story shouldn't be made public. And I think there is probably an intermediate situation, which I tried to apply, and I tried to get my judges to apply when I was president, which is to have a judgment which is public, which sets out all the facts and everything about it, but does not identify the family.
Where there's secrecy, you will have injustice. It will breed in the darkest, dirtiest corners of our legal system, which is what the family courts are. You need to have an open, transparent, accountable system of justice. That's why the family courts are failing, because it is not in plain sight, it's not viewed, it's not accountable, it's not transparent, it's not subject to any real proper democratic oversight whatsoever. And these judges, unelected, so unaccountable, unsackable, operating in complete secrecy. It's anathema to a allegedly modern, contemporary, 21st century democracy to have secret courts and secret justice. The law was originally, I think the 1968 Administration of Justice Act was originally there, allegedly, to protect parents. Now, I tell you, they say, oh, these children might be subject to teasing in the playground if their cases become public. But what about the guy who's done, the banker who gets prosecuted, and he's got kids, and his kids are going to find it embarrassing? Crikey, you would have actually ban everything from being reported if that was the case. You're worried about children being teased in the playground. Secret justice is anathema. It has to be opposed, and it's creeping in more and more by stealth in our justice system. It's unacceptable.
For 2 years now, I've been trying to get more contact. I've been dealing with the social worker who's been really difficult in giving me additional contact because she's supporting what Lindsay wants. Yeah.
Why is she doing that, do you think?
I think the system is set up and biased against fathers, against men.
Why do you think that is?
Because why should a child not have the right to be loved by the father? Why should the father only get phone contact on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday?
Any parent who truly loves their children will not deny the other parent a relationship with those children. So that's when the allegations against me started, that I'd hit them, I'd chastised them. Foolishly, which I subsequently learned, I got angry in court. Angry that anybody could judge me as a mother. Angry that anybody could be making judgments about my behaviour based on whim, on no evidence. It wasn't even flimsy evidence. And the local county court judge turned around and said, well, if this anger is manifest in this way, there's no reason why it won't be manifest with you hitting the children.
It's a huge leap.
Well, it's a huge leap, not even of faith. And not to understand why a mother would get so angry. And similarly, fathers get very angry in court when somebody's making unsubstantiated judgments about them as a parent, about as a human being. And it stood throughout all the proceedings, all the court proceedings. And the advice, and I think it's sound advice, when you find yourself in this black hole that just changes your whole life, destroys your raison d'etre, you have to try and keep a link. You have to. So I write every month. I tell the boys about a little bit about me. They haven't seen me for 7 years. and keep them in touch. And I always put my contact details, and always, they're positive, they're upbeat letters, they're hopeful letters. And I've had to empower them by saying, when you're ready, the door is always open.
Parental alienation's been with us since divorce. It's now got a smart name, but and it's come as a result of some clever research by an American. But it's nothing more nor less than one parent poisoning the children against the other parent. The easiest thing in the world to do, okay? If you're living as a child of 5, 6, 7 in the home of an embittered mother or father, but let's stick with mothers for the moment, you don't have to go around saying, your father is a pig, don't have anything to do with him. You just occasionally drop it out. Oh, well, Dad's left us, hasn't he? And he's gone off with that other woman. And we don't like her, do we? No. And within a very short time, you have built up in the child a knowledge that being friendly with Dad is something Mum doesn't like, and I have to live with Mum, so I'm on her side. That is all it is. And as I say, it has a smart name now. It's been around since time began. Why does it happen? It happens because you cannot, however hard people think you cannot isolate from the feelings you have towards your ex as a father from the feelings you have or used to have towards him as a partner.
I mean, I've got a friend at the moment who's separated from her husband, and he did go off and have an affair with someone else, and it's left her so totally devastated. But she's just been putting her opinions to her girls the whole time, who are a similar age to mine, so they're not young. And she's not encouraging them to see their father at all. She's very much thinking, well, he's made his bed, he can lie in it, he can go away, I'd rather never see him again. And because the girls are living with her and they've seen how hurt that she is, they're finding it hard to forgive him and to talk to him and everything. So, I see her a lot, and I do think, you're an adult, you've got to start putting the girls first and not always putting yourself first and expecting them to pick up the pieces for you. And that's what's happening. They're looking after her, they're being the adults in the relationship, and she's turned into the child.
Take, for the sake of argument, somebody who is accused by his wife of raping her, and it may be that he has done, who knows. The CPS have decided, however, not to prosecute. If he can't afford a lawyer, that leaves him in a position of having to effectively cross-examine the woman that he said to have raped. And of course, in the criminal division, that is absolutely prohibited. That would never happen. So there have been movements and efforts, especially from the judiciary, to try and resolve it, but we're not getting very far because there's no legal aid in cases like that.
The situation then, you get a parent that becomes exonerated. You are successful in exonerating them. How do you then get the child back into this parent's life?
I mean, my personal and professional preference is to use experts. There aren't very many around at all, and certainly not in the days where legal aid has been cut and somebody's got to try and fund it themselves. And also using local authority social workers or CAFCAS officers or guardians who are not necessarily trained in this very extreme sort of work doesn't usually work in my experience. You need somebody who understands what's gone on and is able to broker a situation for the children. I call it demonstering, so they effectively demonster the parent against whom all these allegations have been made. And the children, of course, are incredibly conflicted because the reality is they have said these things which they know aren't true. So it's very, very difficult for them initially to be able to resolve what they may feel they are entirely responsible for, even though perhaps they aren't because the other parent's been involved.
Say it's actually a mum that's not seeing her child, and you've got this contact order and it's been broken and broken and broken. How do you get beyond that? I mean, especially if you're representing the person who is actually the one that's losing out all the time.
Yeah, it's very, very difficult. You have to go back to the court, and time and time again you have to go back and try and enforce the order. If it's the primary carer, the person with whom the children spends most of their time, who's not obeying the order that the other parent has the children at certain times, it's very hard for a court to actually do anything to that primary carer as a punishment without affecting the children.
People say, well, why don't you just send the mother to court, to prison? She's broken the order, send her to prison. Well, I have done that from time to time in very extreme cases with a very, very heavy heart and quite uncertain. Do you think that helps the relationship between the boy and his dad? That you have been responsible, Dad, for sending Mum to prison? Oh, yes, that really helps. That really mends a completely shattered relationship. So we have to cajole, threaten. I mean, I invented a system of sort of increasing threats. You know, if you don't help, the children will go and live with their dad, and then they'll have contact to you.
You've gone up Harriet Harman's roof. You sat there for 3 days. Did you have any contact with Harriet Harman during that time? Did she come up and have a chat with you? Did she speak to you in any way?
She, on the first day, we saw her come out the back door and I just sort of waved. I don't think she said anything. No.
Did she know who you were?
I think it was pretty obvious. So obviously they arrested me. Anyway, I ended up getting a prison sentence.
What made you single out Harriet Harman?
She was the one that actually said if she became Prime Minister, men would be queuing up at the airports to leave the country. That was a statement she said.
Why did she feel that men would suddenly want to leave the country?
Well, you probably have to ask her that question. But
and at that point, how much were you seeing Rosie?
probably alternate weekends. I'd asked for telephone contact. I wasn't allowed to speak to her on the phone. And the judge had given me 10 minutes between 5:30 and 6 on a Wednesday evening. I remember at that point actually, because the judge at the same hearing said to me, "Mr. Stainsbury, do you respect the court?" And I said, "Do you really think I respect the court after all these years of fighting to see my daughter?" And he said, "Well, I suggest you do. And I suggest you start by wearing a suit." And so I said, "So you're telling me if I wear a suit that will make a difference to the contact I have with my daughter?" And he said, "Yes, it will." And that's when I said, "You're not going to get away with this." And 2 weeks later I climbed up on his roof, and that was Judge Tysack.
So while you were in prison, you were only in there for a short amount of time. Were you able to have visitors? What was the situation?
Everything's so slow in prison. You have to fill in forms and request visitors, all that sort of thing, and nothing happens very quick. And I had a knock on the door, and I was told I got visitors. And I was like, "Oh, wow." And it's quite a relief to get out of a cell that you're stuck in for 23 hours a day, So I was like, "Oh, this is good." So of course I go off to get my visit, and 2 guys never seen before, and they said, "We've been sent from government to ask if you get the contact that you want with your daughter, will you stop campaigning?"
Did you ask who they were? Did you ask
yeah,
for names?
They wouldn't give me the name, but they said they'd been sent from government.
And when they said government, did they say which department they were from?
They wouldn't say anything, wouldn't give anything away. That was all, and they were very friendly, as in beyond that, but they wouldn't give me any information. And I said, not really, but I said the reality is, if my daughter lived with me, I couldn't campaign. It'd be impossible. But of course, what I later found out after we've been given the show residence is far more to it than that, in that the system is not set up for 2 parents, it's only set up for 1 parent. When I say the system, things like the child benefit, child tax credits, even like the school, all these things are only set up for 1 parent. And of course, once I achieved the shared residence and care, I started seeing this because I was starting to experience the other side of it.
The criticism that has been levelled at direct action campaigners like Fathers for Justice is that they did the cause of fathers who are fighting to see their children in court, that it basically did them no good whatsoever. What's your feeling on that?
The general public wouldn't know what's going on. Every so often they would come across someone they knew, or someone had a brother or sister who's struggling to see their children. But it was, everyone just assumed that, well, they must have done something wrong then. They would never believe that a normal parent who'd done nothing wrong would have to go to court, face false charges to try and get access to their children. So in my opinion, the biggest, one of the biggest benefits of the direct action was it put the whole subject matter right in the face of the public. People asked us the question of why we were doing this, and we were able to explain that I'm a dad, I'm a parent, I've done nothing wrong, this is what I'm having to go through to get to see my children. And people could understand that you could spend years, not just 1 or 2, but I was 10, I know people that have been 12 years in the family court, and the public started to realise the biggest benefit is there's something wrong with our family courts if this is happening.
So can you explain to me what drove you to become the purple powder bomber that threw condoms of purple powder over Tony Blair? I mean, what drove you to that?
Well, I'd spent nearly 6 years in the family court and I got absolutely nowhere. I hadn't seen my daughter, I think once in 6 years. So once from separation I'd seen her, and my son a handful of times. It was outrageous that 6 years of going through the system, which I expected to sort things out in a very short time, was still doing nothing. And the frustration, I spoke to Tony Blair on LBC radio earlier in 2004. I gave him quite a long question, 4 minutes. I remember the silence at the end of the question, as I think they all tried to digest how on earth did he get that much in, and Tony Blair was left just speechless. He just didn't know what to say, and said, well, he'd have to look into it and could he come back to me. And eventually he wrote to me, nice letter. It was really was a fob off, and around about that time an opportunity presented itself for us to gain access to the inner chamber Parliament, and we felt that it was time to really raise the profile and let people know just how bad things were.
If you had a magic wand and you could put it right, what are the things that you would want to see it really functioning at its best?
Legal aid for people that are facing very difficult situations and now are having to be litigants in person, with all the stress that entails for them, and the confusion and the fear, I can only imagine, of having to go to court on their own. So legal aid absolutely, in terms of the serious cases, and domestic violence I know is already covered, but an extension out to allow that to be properly dealt with for people. I think probably more judges at the moment, although I don't have any statistics I can back that up with. My experience is the judges are tired, they're working exceptionally hard, and because they have more litigants in person and Mackenzie Friends, things are taking a lot longer for them, and they're having to do far more than they would normally. So they're having to explain things, not just procedure, but their judgments. I think there's more appeals going on. Well, again, I don't know if that's right statistically, but I think so. More judges, more legal aid, certainly more of a psychotherapeutic input and training in that vein at the beginning, whether it's for CAFCAS or whether it's for mediators, but allowing people to try and resolve things before you get to court. And I guess that's it really.
To a lot of dads, a lot of parents, there is a gaping omission here that the legal presumption of shared parenting needs to be in. Is there any way that this can be revisited?
It was, to an extent, it was sort of experimental legislation. And I think if we can show that actually it didn't work as well as it should have done, it could be toughened up, or if it hasn't worked at all, then we should certainly not be afraid to have a look at it. And of course there have been other big changes to the way cases work with legal aid and everything else as well. So we've got to take all these different factors into account. But the door certainly isn't closed about revisiting that legislation.
So the good news is the most important thing you can do for your children is to maintain a healthy and stable relationship with your partner. So don't, in this modern way, focus on the children. Focus on your partner.
The reality of marriage is it brings a depth and it brings a commitment to a relationship. But that doesn't mean that everything's then easy. It means you've got someone to support you and stand by you. with all the struggles and all the difficulties.
And what about getting married yourself? I mean, has this process put you off marriage?
No, it hasn't. I hope that I can find the person that I click well with and, yeah, have a family one day.
Don't waste time on getting caught up in stupid stuff, because it's, you know, anything can happen just like that. So you're just very grateful, I think.
Yeah. It'd be lovely to have children and a family, but it's going to take work. I can see it's going to take a lot of work.
Oh, I gotta get there in the morning. Ding, ding, dong, they're gonna chime. Kick up the rumpus, don't lose your compass. Please get me to the church on time. I got to get there in the morning. Ding, ding, dong, now gonna chime. Punch me and jolly, stab me and belly, but get me to the church. Get me to the church. Pete's sake, get me to the church on time. Well, that's how I feel about that.